Hello everyone, welcome to the ITS Academy. Our today's lecture is on the topic liver diseases. So let's begin with our lecture. First, let's say the introduction. Let me tell you, liver is the main organ of the body. Your liver does a lot of things that keep you healthy. It turns nutrient into chemicals your body needs. It filter out the poison. It helps you to turn food into energy. And so when your liver doesn't work well, that can affect your whole body. So different things can cause serious liver condition, and you will want to know about the top causes, the infections, and the dysfunctioning of the liver occurs due to many of the disorders. So nutrition related function of the liver includes your emulsification of dietary fat by bile prior to digestion, your carbohydrate metabolism that maintain the blood glucose store glycogen. Third is your protein metabolism. It helps in the protein metabolism, that is the synthesis and regulation of the amino acids. Fourth is your lipid metabolism, the production of triglycerides and lipoprotein, and the micronutrients, that is the storage of vitamins such as A, B2, B3, B6, B12, K, and folate. So many diseases and conditions can affect the liver. For example, certain drugs like excessive amount of acetaminophen and acetaminophen combination medicines like Vicodin or narco, as well as statin, cirrhosis, alcohol abuse, hepatitis A, B, C, D, E, infectious non-alcoholic fatty liver diseases, and iron overload. So these are the symptoms that causes the liver diseases and affects your liver in many kinds. So for this, nutritional assessment is very important. Assessment of nutritional status is difficult in patient with the liver disorder because the standard methods are confounded by the disease process. For example, fluid retention, distorted body weight, impaired liver function, and preclude use of most biochemical markers. So there are some assessing global nutrition status in the patient with liver diseases. For this, you have to determine the body mass index, and that should be relative to 20 kg per meter square. And if not able to determine the BMI, then determine the mid-arm muscle circumference relative to the fifth percentile of the gender and age match. Estimate the adequacy of recent energy intake relative to the estimated requirement, and follow the algorithm using additional factors like to impair nutritional status if present to subjectively override final category of nutrition. So next disease comes hepatitis. Hepatitis is an inflammation of the liver and can arise from a viral infection. For example, hepatitis A, B, C, D, E, and G. An autoimmune response or from other damage. For example, your alcoholic hepatitis. The nutrition implication vary depending on the severity of the condition and the time of the span. So it is generally categorized into two categories, the acute hepatitis and the chronic hepatitis. In general, patients with acute hepatitis are very ill and have a poor appetite and eat very little. So no dietary restriction should be imposed and patients should be encouraged to eat what they can. Small frequent snacks and nourishing drink may be better tolerated than large meals, and fat restrictions used in the past are not evidence based on the dietary fat will not exacerbate the condition if the patient is able to eat it. So severe undernutrition may accompany acute alcoholic hepatitis, and instigating every early nutrition support, usually through enteral feeding, is recommended. Now, if we talk about the chronic hepatitis, So patients with chronic hepatitis may vary from those who are very undernourished and following prolonged illness and poor intake to those who are obese, either incidentally or secondary to long-term treatment with the steroid. So individual assessment is required for nutritional advice tailored accordingly. So nutritional management in hepatitis, appropriate nutrition management is important and influences the prognosis. Therefore, undernourished patients who go on to liver transplantation have a greater risk of complications, and obesity is a risk factor for progression of chronic liver disease and associated with non-responsiveness of antiviral therapy. So hepatitis is a very viral infection, very common problem, and it is a viral infection of your liver. Causes inflammation and liver damage, making it difficult to your liver to function as it should. So all types of hepatitis are contagious, but you can reduce your risk by getting vaccinated for type A and B or taking other preventive steps, including the practicing safe and not sharing the needles. So there are generally in these five types of hepatitis A, B, C, D, and G. So in hepatitis A is a typically spread through the contact and contaminated food or water. Symptoms may clear up without treatment, but recovery can take a few weeks. In hepatitis B, it is an acute or chronic form of hepatitis. It's spread through bodily fluid such as the your blood and semen. While hepatitis B is treatable and there's no cure for it. Early treatment is key to avoiding complications, so it's best to get regular screening if you are at risk. If you talk about hepatitis C, it can also be acute and chronic. It is often spread through the contact with the blood from someone with hepatitis C. While it often doesn't cause symptoms in its early stage, and it can lead to permanent liver damage in its later stage. In hepatitis D, it is a serious form of hepatitis that only develops in people with hepatitis B. It can't be contracted on its own, so it can also be either acute or chronic. If we talk about hepatitis E, it is usually caused by the drinking contaminated water. Generally, it clears up on its own within a few weeks without any lasting or complications. So next is your cirrhosis. Cirrhosis is irreversible damage of hepatocyte. So most patients with cirrhosis have increased energy protein requirement and frequently undernourished, therefore requiring nutritional support. So here the dietary restriction should not be routinely imposed, and complications arising from cirrhosis includes the ascites, edema, and encephalopathy, and steatohorrhea may benefit from dietary modification providing it is undertaken within a context of nutritional adequacy, that is, feed first and restrict second. So cirrhosis refers to the scarring that result from the liver diseases and such as alcohol use disorders. Cystic fibrosis and syphilis may also lead to liver damage and eventually cirrhosis. So your liver can regenerate in response to damage, but this process usually results in the development of scar tissue, and the more scar tissue that develops, the harder it is for your liver to function in proper manner. So in its early stage, cirrhosis is often treatable by addressing the underlying causes but if left unmanaged, it can lead to other complications and become life-threatening. It has following symptoms such as easy bruising may occur due to the decreased production of clotting factors such as bile salt can deposit in the skin causing itching, and gynecomastia or enlarged breast in men may occur because of an imbalance in sex hormones, and especially an increase in estradiol, impotence, poor sex drive, and shrinkage testicles are due to the decrease in function of sex hormone. Confusion and lethargy may occur if ammonia levels rise in the bloodstream, and cystitis, as I told, that accumulation within the abdominal cavity occurs because of decreased protein production, and muscle wasting may occur because of reduced protein production. So next is your ascites and oedema. So it is a in ascites, a fluid retention is common in cirrhosis and end-stage liver diseases and has a relevance to nutrition. Here, the abdominal distensions can impair food intake, leading to an inadequate nutritional status. The energy expenditure increases due to the exertion of carrying additional weight. The negative nitrogen balance can be induced by repeated large volume parentheses, even if the intravenous albumin infused. Restricting the dietary sodium can help reduce or control the degree of fluid retention, and thus the improve your symptoms. So for this, there are some nutritional management of ascites and oedema, that the patient should be encouraged to eat as much as they are able to and be tempted with the tasty food. Small frequent meals with snacks every 1 to 2 hours may optimize intake. The energy density of the food may be increased by the addition of extra sugar, honey, double cream, oil, and salt-free butter. Fat should be restricted unless the patient finds it unpalatable or has clinically diagnosed steatorrhea. Nutritional status should be monitored regularly, and decision about whether to restrict sodium intake must balance the potential benefits against the risk of reducing nutrient intake. So for this, it is important that you should go for low sodium diet for ascites and oedema, because patients are usually prescribed diuretic as increased urinary sodium output and therefore induces negative sodium balance and fluid loss. So limiting dietary sodium intake will facilitate this and will lead to a more rapid resolution, and also leads to decrease in doses of diuretic being prescribed and fewer associated complications. So these advantages must be balanced against the negative effect that a low sodium diet may have no total nutrient intake. So two level of restrictions are generally advised. Firstly, that you should go for no added salt diet. Usually, it comes your 80 to 100 millimole sodium per day. In this category, you have to avoid the salt at the table. Keep salt in cooking to minimum and avoid high salt food, including most preserved or tinned items such as bacon, ham, sausage, tinned and packet soups. Cheese should be limited, and fast food and ready meals should also be avoided in this condition. And the next second restriction is that you should go for low sodium diet. Means avoid all the salt at the table and in the cooking. Avoid food prepared outside home unless a specific arrangement have been made, and also avoid high salt foods listed as no added salt, as I told in the previous. Restrict bread intake to 2 slices. Use salt free butter, margarines. Restrict milk to half, and use pepper, vinegar, spices, herbs, and lemon for flavoring. So these are the precautions that you must have to go through when you are treating your ascites and oedema. Next is your portal systematic encephalopathy. So it is a traditional treatment of portal systematic encephalopathy that includes the restriction of dietary protein on the basis that nitrogenous compounds of the dietary origin were implicated in the pathogenesis. The re-evaluation of the evidence has shown that dietary protein restriction is not an effective treatment and can lead to rapid deterioration in nutritional status because protein requirement is increased in chronic liver diseases. So for this condition, there is a nutritional management for PSE, that is portal systematic encephalopathy. There is a sufficient protein. You have to take sufficient protein to meet the estimated requirement should be provided. Protein is best tolerated if spread out across the day. Eating several smaller meals and a bedtime snack is preferable to a fewer larger meals. Vegetable and dairy proteins are better tolerated than protein from the meat and fish. Next is your steatorrhea. In steatorrhea, although greater than 50% of the patients with chronic liver disease have increased fecal fat excretion, relatively few have steatorrhea. Those who do will benefit from restricting dietary fat to tolerance. Dietary fat contributes to the palatability of the food and also provides energy, fat-soluble vitamin, and essential fatty acids. So a low-fat diet is not recommended in this unless the symptoms of steatorrhea are jeopardizing nutritional status or quality of life. Advice must be given to ensure that the diet remains adequate in all the other nutrients, especially energy, fat-soluble vitamin, and essentially fatty acids. Steatorrhea due to the bile insufficiency cannot be treated with the pancreatic enzyme replacement therapy, although this may have a role if there is a concomitant pancreatic disease. The next is your fatty liver. So lipid deposit in the liver are the common but reversible liver disorder associated with the obesity and in some patients excessive alcohol intake. Usually fatty liver is asymptomatic but may progress to non-alcoholic steatohepatitis and even cirrhosis. A moderate energy restriction that reduces excessive weight is associated with the improvement in liver function test and quality of life. So there is a debate over the optimum dietary composition to achieve the this, but in the absence of definitive evidence, patients should advise to follow a balance of good health. So the next is your liver transplantation. In liver transplantation, it is approximately done for 700 liver transplantation are undertaken annually. First position for this is pre-operative, means patient being worked up for transplantation should undergo a detailed nutritional assessment, that is important to establish their nutritional status and identify the scope of nutritional support. Undernourished patients have a significantly greater risk of increased morbidity and mortality after surgery, so implementing early pre-surgery nutritional support is vital. Next is your immediately post-operative. Post-operative nutrition support varies from center to center. Early feeding via jejunally placed tube has shown to be safe and effective method of feeding post-transplant patient associated with the reduced infection. So patient parenteral nutrition is only indicative if the Gastrointestinal tract cannot be used for more than 5 days, and wherever possible, attempt should be made to feed via the guts. Third is the recovery in hospital. So when the oral intake resumes, patients should be encouraged to eat unrestricted diet. Transient hyperglycemia due to medication does not require dietary interventions. Attention to the food hygiene is important because of immunosuppression, although no food restrictions are required. So in this medium to long term, you have to following the liver transplantation. Most patients gain weight, especially in the first 6 months, and this is appropriate if correcting the pre-transplant undernutrition. But greater than 30% patient becomes obese at 3 years after surgery, and up to 40% have hyperlipidemia. So long-term cardiovascular risk therefore increases, and it is a concern. General dietary advice, for example, uh, it is recommended that the patient should given a balance of good health and a regular monitoring of body mass index and serum lipids used to identify those who need more specific guidance. So these are all are the things that you should keep in mind while any of the when you go for a liver transplantation therapy. So along with this, there also occurs a problem of liver cell adenoma. It is a tumor that does not have cancer. It's uncommon, but women who take birth control pills for a long time are more prone to the other people who develop it. And it comes sometimes other cause of liver diseases may be occurs due to alcohol abuse, can lead to cirrhosis as I told. So can non-alcoholic fatty liver disease long term causes the hepatitis B and C. Drug overdoses also is one of the fact of liver damage. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, that is the NAFT, as I told in the previous slide, is when too much fat has built up inside your liver, and the extra fat can inflame your liver. And one type of NFD is non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. So there are many ways. If I let me remind you again about the fatty liver, that fat build up in the liver can lead to fatty liver disease. So it could be from alcoholic fatty acid or non-alcoholic fatty acids. So in order to prevent our liver from many of the disorders, so there are general complications that our liver diseases vary depending on the cause of your liver problem. So earlier preventions may be helpful in preventing your liver from getting damage. Firstly, is to drink alcohol in moderate quantity. It is obvious that for healthy adult, that means up to one drink a day, or for a woman up to two drinks a day for men. So heavy or high risk drinking is defined as more than 8 drinks a week for a woman and more than 15 drinks a man week for in a week for a man. Another thing is you have to avoid risky behavior. Means for this, if you are suffering from hepatitis B, so you should use a condom during sex. And if you choose to have tattoos or body piercing, be picky about the cleanliness and safety when selecting a shop. You should also get vaccinated if you are at increased risk of contracting hepatitis, or if you have already been infected with any form of the hepatitis virus. Talk to your doctor about getting the hepatitis A and B vaccines. Then next prevention, you can go for use medication wisely. Means take uh, prescriptions and non-prescription drugs only when needed and only in recommended dose. Avoid contact with other people's blood and body fluid, as hepatitis virus can be spread by accidental needle sticks or improper cleanup of the blood or body fluid. Keep your body safe, keep your food safe. means wash your hands thoroughly before eating or preparing food. Take care with aerosol spray. Make sure to use these products in a well ventilated areas. Protect your skin, such as when using insecticides and other toxic chemicals. Wear gloves, long sleeves, and hat mask so the chemical aren't absorbed through your skin. Maintain a healthy weight, means obesity can cause non-alcoholic fatty acids diseases. So thank you for being with us. I hope you have understood all the diseases and disorders that occur in liver and how the damages cause. For more information related to this, you can log on to our website www.itlsacademy.com and register yourself. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, Twitter, LinkedIn. And yes, do not forget to subscribe our channel ITLS Academy at YouTube. Thank you.